Okay, so we're going to talk about really four types. So we're going to start with direct, and then joint and inverse variation. And when you have direct variation, there's going to be a relationship between two variables. Generally, the variables are x and y, but it doesn't have to be x and y. Okay, so direct variation is a relationship between variables x and y that can be written as this equation. Y equals kx, or k times x, where k cannot be equal to 0, and the variable k is called the constant of variation. Okay, the variable k is called the constant of variation. Okay, and so for this equation, you have to have something that says y varies directly as x. Okay, if it says y varies directly as x, your equation is y equals kx. Sometimes they use different variables, so it just depends on what they use first. Okay, this equation, y equals kx, is a linear equation. Okay, if you think of it in the form y equals mx plus b, which is what we're used to associating with a linear equation, the slope in this case would be your value of k. Okay, your slope would be k, and then your y-intercept, your b value, is going to be 0. Okay, so the slope is k and the y-intercept is 0 if we think of it as a linear equation. The next type we're going to look at is joint variation. And if y varies jointly as x and z, then we write that as y equals k times x times z. Or you can just write kxz. Okay, that variable k is still going to represent the constant of variation. Okay, so your equation for jointly is y equals kxz. Alright, so in example 1, it says if x varies directly as y, find x when y is 8. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to write our variation equation, and we are going to solve for k. So if x varies directly as y, we would write x equals k times y. So whatever variable they give you first is going to be here, and then directly as y, the y is going to be multiplied by the k. So it goes in the order that they're given to you. Now it says to find x when y equals 8, but we can't do that until we know what k is. So our first step is always going to be to find the value of k. Okay, and they're going to give you a pair so that you can do that. So y is 6.5 when x is 13. So our first step is always going to be to find k. All right, so when you're finding k, we're going to solve. Okay, some of these we're going to do without a calculator, some of these we're going to do with a calculator. So if you plug in 13 equals k times 6.5, okay, to solve for k, we're just going to divide by 6.5. We can do this one without a calculator. How many times does 6.5 go into 13? 2. Okay, now one thing I want you to write for each problem is the variation equation. This is something that you are definitely going to do on your next assessment, and it's something that last year I recognized people weren't sure what the variation equation is, so I want to make sure we know what that is. So the variation equation is going to be what you set up here, except with the constant in it. So your variation equation is going to be x equals 2y. Okay, so on your homework as well, I just want you to write that and box it in. Okay, so the equation is always going to have that constant in there. Okay, and then your second step is to find x when y is 8. So it's going to be x equals 2 times 8. So you're going to plug in 8 for y, so x is 16. Okay, so then based on that, you guys want to try part B? So see if you can set up your equation. Okay, so make sure you're paying attention to how this is written. So this one says as y varies directly as x. So if it starts with the y, okay, then you are going to start with y as well. So this is y equals kx. And then they did give this to you in a little bit different of a format. So you're going to find y when x is 11. But to find k, you are going to have to plug in y is 35 when x is 7. So 35 equals k times 7, okay, which means k equals 5. So for your variation equation, you're going to have 5x. Okay, you don't have to label this as your variation equation every time in your homework, but I would like you to box that in. Okay, and then your second step is to find y when x is 11. Okay, so that is your direct variation. All right, the next type is going to be some examples where they vary jointly. Okay, so if A varies jointly as B and C, so A varies jointly as B and C, means our equation is A equals K times BC. Okay, and we have to find A when B is 4 and C is -3. Alright, so I always look for the group that they give you together. Whatever group they give you, that's what you're going to have to plug in. Okay, so we're going to do -108 equals K times 2 times 9. Okay, now if you did this with a calculator, I'd have you multiply and divide. If you're doing this without a calculator though, instead of multiplying, just divide by the 2 times 9. to make this easier to do, because these are going to cancel. And then it would be easy for us to divide 108 by which one of these numbers? 2, because what's half of 108? Yep. So then this becomes negative 54 over 9, and that's one of our math facts, right? How many times does 9 go into 54? Yep. So K is negative 6. Okay, so then your equation is going to be A equals negative 6BC. Okay, so that is your variation equation. Okay, and then you're going to find A when B is 4 and C is negative 3. So we know 4 times 3 is 12, negative 12 times negative 6 would be positive 72. Okay, so I want you to try part B. Okay, so you have 2 answers for each one. Okay, so once you plug this in, we know 2 times 3 is 6, 18 divided by 6 is 3, so this is your equation. Okay, and then to solve for y, when you plug those in and multiply, you will get negative 21. Okay, not too bad so far, right? All right, and then we're going to go on to inverse variation. Okay, so when you have inverse variation, if it says y varies inversely as x, that is represented by this equation. Y equals k over x. And then they'll specify that your x value can't be 0 because it's in the denominator. Okay, so your equation is y equals k over x. So I put these boxes here, that way if you're trying to look up the equation, you can just go back and find that quickly. Now this last line here that says 2 quantities, it should say are, 2 quantities are related by inverse variation if their product is equal to the constant k. The reason why that's true is because if you have this equation and you solve for k, to get k by itself, what would we do to both sides? Multiply by x. So if we multiply both sides by x, you end up with k is equal to x times y. Okay, so what this is saying is if you multiply those 2 variables together and it's equal to k, it's direct variation. Or sorry, inverse variation is what I meant to say. So if you multiply those together, that would be inverse variation. So in example 3, if f varies inversely as g, we're going to find f when g equals negative 6, f is 15 when g equals 9. And you can see too in the examples we did before, sometimes they give you that pair first, sometimes they give you that pair second. When you set this up, f varies inversely as g. You have f equals k over g. So if 15 equals k over 9, okay, we're going to multiply both sides by k. You can use your calculator for this. If you were doing this without a calculator, I would do 10 times 15, because we know that's what? 150, and then if you do it times 10, it's 15 more, so you just have to do 15 less. So 150 minus 15 is 135. Okay, but again, this is fine if you use your calculator for some of those bigger numbers. So then your equation is f equals 135 over g. All right, and then we are going to find f when g is -6. Again, you can use your calculator for that. And you will get a decimal. All right, what did we get for that one? -22.5. Great. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a chance to do B. All right, so check your equation. When you plug in 2 and 2 for x and y, you multiply both sides by 2 to get 4. And then you're going to find y when x equals 1. So if you're finding y and x is 1, you're just going to get 4. 4 divided by 1 is going to be 4. Okay, so for any of those problems, again, I just want these two things boxed in. And then make sure you show your work, okay? All right. Example 4 says, state whether the equation represents a direct, joint, or inverse variation for the given variable. And then you're going to name the constant of variation, which just means you are going to find the k value. Okay, so if it is direct variation, it will be linear. Joint, you have multiple variables, and inverse, you should have division. Okay, so for this one, y equals 0.2 times d, and then the y, they're saying that y is the variable that you are using. So we would say y varies, and then we're going to compare it to d. Would that be direct, joint, or inverse? Direct. So y varies directly with d, and then what's your k value? 0.2. Yeah. So this would be your solution. Okay, so this last variable, that is just what you are saying how it varies. Okay, so z equals 1/3 xy, z is the variable. So z varies, and you have two variables, which means it's which one? Jointly. So z varies jointly as x and y, and then your value for k is the 1/3. Okay, so you were writing the variation statement, and then you were identifying the value of k for those. Okay, so on this side we did inverse variation, and then the other type of variation is combined, which is just a combination of direct and inverse, or sometimes it will be jointly and inverse variation. So one quantity varies directly and or inversely. So in example 5, it says, suppose A varies directly as B and A varies inversely as C. So it's two of those combined. So the way that you would write your equation is A equals, if it's directly as B, it's K times B. If it's inversely, it would be K over C. So all we need is the over C. Okay, and then just like they did before, they're going to give us a set of 3 variables. So it says, find B when A is 2.5 and C is 18, if B equals 6 when C equals 4 and A equals 96. So you have to find which one is that group, and then you can plug in your values. Okay, so we're going to find K first. So 96 is your value for A. We're trying to find K. B is 6, and then C is 4. Okay, and you can use your calculator for this one. So first step, we're going to multiply both sides by 4 because we want these to cancel. 6k is what's left, and 4 times 96 is going to be what? 334. Okay, and then we're just dividing both sides by 6. So your k value is 64. Okay, so that means your equation is A equals 64B over C. Okay, now in step 2, they say find B when A is 2.5. So you're plugging in the 2.5 for A. You won't have anything plugged in for B, and then C is 18. So the ones that we've been doing up to this point, we were able to just evaluate. This we just have to solve. Okay, so in order to solve for B, we can multiply both sides by 18. You can also multiply by the reciprocal if you want to do this in one step. Okay, and then 18 times 2.5 is 45. And so you divide. Okay, this is going to be a decimal. So 45 and 64, that is the reduced fraction. You can leave it as 45 over 64, or you can leave it as a rounded decimal, which would be 0.7 if you divided. Okay, so you can leave as a reduced fraction. Or as a rounded decimal. We know that that we can't reduce this because remember that 64 is 2 to the 6th. 64 is 2 to the 6th power. 45 is not going to have any 2's in it because it's an odd number. Okay, so we can't reduce that any further. Okay, and then tomorrow we are going to do the applications together.